Good evening, everyone. I hope this video finds you doing amazing. Tonight, I'll be narrating the heartwarming tale of Gary the Snail, SpongeBob's most loyal and gentle companion. So, find a cozy spot, settle in, and let the calm of the ocean carry you. May this story help you relax, unwind, and drift peacefully off to sleep. In the colourful, bustling world of Bikini Bottom, where jellyfish dance through the water and laughter bubbles from every corner, there exists a home filled with warmth, kindness, and love. At the very heart of this home lives not just SpongeBob SquarePants, but also his dearest companion, Gary the Snail. To many, Gary might seem like just an ordinary sea snail, moving slowly with his shell on his back and speaking only in a soft, gentle meow. But to SpongeBob, and truly to those who take the time to look closely, Gary is so much more than that. He is a best friend, a confidant, and family. Gary has been with SpongeBob for as long as we can remember. In fact, flashbacks in SpongeBob's life, like those shown in Friend or Foe, reveal that Gary was by his side since childhood. While other kids might have grown up with toys or stuffed animals to comfort them, SpongeBob had something better, a living, loyal friend who followed him through every chapter of his life. Even as a young sponge, SpongeBob would proudly hold Gary in his arms, caring for him with a devotion that only grew stronger as the years passed. Their bond was never forced, it was natural, as if the two were destined to find one another in the vast ocean. Gary, though quiet, is no ordinary pet. His big round eyes, perched atop his stalks, shimmer with curiosity and wisdom. His shell, with its familiar pink swirl, hides not just his soft body, but an entire world of personality and character. For SpongeBob, Gary is not simply a pet, he is family. When SpongeBob wakes up in the morning, the first sound he often hears is the soft meow of Gary, reminding him that breakfast is due. And when SpongeBob returns home, after a long day of work at the Krusty Krab, it is Gary's greeting that warms his heart and makes the Pineapple House feel truly alive. Their mornings together set the tone for their wholesome lives. SpongeBob, always eager to please, carefully pours a bowl of snail food, making sure Gary has enough for a full meal. Sometimes, SpongeBob will even go the extra mile, decorating Gary's food or presenting it as though he's serving a royal feast. And Gary, with his calm demeanour, accepts it with a dignified meow, a sound that SpongeBob interprets as gratitude. These simple rituals, repeated day after day, are what form the foundation of their unbreakable bond. But Gary's relationship isn't only with SpongeBob, it extends to the entire community of Bikini Bottom. Take Patrick, for example. Though Patrick may not always understand the responsibilities of caring for a snail, he shares moments with Gary that are as endearing as they are amusing. There was a time in Dumped when SpongeBob thought Gary had chosen Patrick over him. While SpongeBob's heart broke, Gary's actions weren't out of malice. Instead, they showed that Gary, like any creature, has needs and desires, sometimes as simple as following the scent of a cookie in Patrick's pocket. But in the end, Gary returned to SpongeBob, reminding everyone that while he may wander, his true home and loyalty will always remain with the sponge who loves him most. Even Squidward, who often grumbles at SpongeBob's endless cheer, shows a softer side when Gary is around. Though Squidward might roll his eyes at the sight of snail slime on his lawn, or sigh when Gary ends up near his clarinet, there's an unspoken respect there. Squidward knows Gary isn't just a pet, he's a presence that fills SpongeBob's life with joy. In fact, on rare occasions, Squidward himself has been seen acknowledging Gary with a subtle nod, a quiet recognition of the snail's intelligence and importance. And then, of course, there's SpongeBob himself. His devotion to Gary is unmatched. When SpongeBob looks into Gary's eyes, it's clear he sees not just a pet, but a companion who understands him in ways few others do. While SpongeBob's friends sometimes grow tired of his energy or fail to grasp his optimism, Gary listens silently, with patience and love. That's the magic of their relationship. Where words might fail, meows and gestures are enough. Gary's intelligence also sets him apart. Though many in Bikini Bottom see snails as simple creatures, Gary repeatedly proves he is far more clever than most assume. In Sleepy Time, when SpongeBob ventures into dreamland, Gary appears not as a simple pet, but as a wise and sophisticated guide. Wearing a library outfit and speaking with eloquence, Gary reveals a hidden side to his personality. He isn't just aware of his surroundings, he's deeply thoughtful, almost philosophical. It's in moments like these that the audience is reminded that Gary is more than a companion. He is a source of quiet wisdom in SpongeBob's life. As the days flow into nights, Gary remains a constant presence in the Pineapple House. Whether perched atop SpongeBob's bed as he drifts to sleep, or nestled comfortably in his snail bed, Gary symbolizes home. And no matter what chaos unfolds in Bikini Bottom, whether it's a jellyfishing mishap, a boating school accident, or another one of Plankton's schemes, SpongeBob always knows he has Gary to come home to. The Pineapple House might be quirky, with its pineapple-shaped walls and sponge-shaped resident, but Gary's gentle meow makes it feel like the warmest place in the sea. Perhaps the most touching thing about Gary is the unconditional love he shares with SpongeBob. In every adventure, in every laugh, and in every tear, Gary is there. He doesn't ask for much, just food, care, and companionship, but in return, he gives SpongeBob the greatest gift of all, loyalty. That loyalty is why SpongeBob's eyes light up whenever he speaks about Gary. It's why his voice fills with pride whenever he says, "That's my Gary." And it's why the audience can't help but smile, knowing that beneath all the humour and silliness of Bikini Bottom lies a very real, very tender relationship between a sponge and his snail. So, as our story begins, we see SpongeBob and Gary not just as owner and pet, but as best friends, two souls who found each other in the wide ocean and decided never to let go. Their journey is filled with laughter, quiet moments, and the kind of love that doesn't need words to be understood. In Gary's meow and SpongeBob's wide grin, we find a simple truth, that happiness isn't always about grand adventures or wild excitement. Sometimes, happiness is just coming home to someone who cares. And, for SpongeBob SquarePants, that someone will always be Gary. When the sun rises over Bikini Bottom, and the ocean begins to glow with a soft morning light, the Pineapple House at 124 Conch Street stirs with gentle sounds. SpongeBob's alarm might ring loudly, or his laughter might echo as he jumps out of bed ready to seize the day, but even before all of that, there is Gary. The faithful snail begins his mornings with a slow stretch, his shell tilting slightly as he awakens, and a soft meow that signals the start of another day together with his sponge. For Gary, mornings mean one thing above all else: breakfast. SpongeBob, ever attentive, never forgets his friend's first meal of the day. Whether it's the standard snail food poured into Gary's bowl, or a carefully mixed treat SpongeBob concocts with love, Gary is always the first to be served. Episodes like Treats reveal just how important food is in Gary's life. So much so that SpongeBob once spoiled him with endless snail snacks, only to learn the valuable lesson that love and moderation matter more than constant treats. Still, every morning, Gary's eyes brighten when SpongeBob sets down his bowl. It's not just about the food, it's about the care that comes with it. Once breakfast is done, Gary spends his mornings exploring the house. The pineapple, with its cozy nooks and SpongeBob's endless decorations, is as much Gary's home as it is SpongeBob's. In episodes like Gary Takes a Bath, we see how Gary has his own routines and habits, curling up in his snail bed, leaving a trail across the tiled floors, or simply lounging in SpongeBob's armchair as if he were king of the house. SpongeBob never minds. In fact, he often encourages Gary to be comfortable wherever he pleases. For SpongeBob, a chair is just furniture, but for Gary, it's a throne. Gary's daily life might seem quiet, but it's filled with little moments of interaction that make it special. SpongeBob often talks to him throughout the day, sharing stories about work at the Krusty Krab, plans for jellyfishing with Patrick, or his excitement over learning something new at boating school. To anyone else, Gary's replies are simply meows, but SpongeBob understands every tone, every inflection, every subtle meaning. Their communication goes far beyond words. It's a shared understanding built over years of companionship. When SpongeBob asks, "How was your day, Gare Bear?" Gary's calm meow is enough to fill the pineapple house with warmth. Of course, no day in Gary's life is complete without his favourite activity, napping. Gary can sleep anywhere, from the comfort of his snail bed to the corner of SpongeBob's library. In Sleepy Time, we learn just how deep his dreams can go. While SpongeBob travels through the dreamscapes of Bikini Bottom, Gary appears as a sophisticated, well-read scholar, revealing a side of him that surprises even SpongeBob. But in his waking hours, Gary's naps are simply peaceful pauses in his quiet life, punctuated by the occasional stretch and meow. Afternoons often bring interaction with SpongeBob's friends. Patrick, ever the enthusiastic but clueless starfish, sometimes drops by to visit. Though his attempts at caring for Gary are often misguided, Patrick means well. In Dumped, Patrick briefly becomes Gary's caretaker, though only because Gary was following the cookie crumbs in Patrick's pocket. The moment served as a reminder of just how central SpongeBob is to Gary's heart. Patrick might provide a snack, but SpongeBob provides love, and that's what truly matters to the little snail. Sometimes, Squidward will cross paths with Gary. While Squidward usually shows little patience for SpongeBob's antics, he rarely directs his annoyance toward Gary himself. In I Was a Teenage Gary, for instance, Squidward's neglect nearly caused Gary harm when he failed to feed him while SpongeBob and Patrick were away. But this incident only reinforced how essential SpongeBob's love and attention are. Squidward may have learned his lesson the hard way, but Gary came through stronger and more loyal than ever. Evenings in Gary's day are some of the most wholesome moments of all. After SpongeBob returns from the Krusty Krab, tired yet still smiling, it is Gary who greets him. A simple meow at the door, a slow crawl towards SpongeBob's legs, and suddenly the pineapple house feels alive with warmth again. SpongeBob will often scoop Gary into his arms, spinning around with laughter, as if coming home to him is the highlight of his day. And perhaps, for SpongeBob, it truly is. Dinner mirrors breakfast, another small act of love. SpongeBob carefully fills Gary's bowl, making sure he eats well. And sometimes, when SpongeBob feels creative, he might prepare something extra, speaking to Gary as though he were a guest of honor. Gary, with his usual calm demeanor, accepts it with quiet gratitude. These routines, though simple, are the heartbeats of their bond. They are proof that love doesn't always come from grand gestures, but from the small, everyday moments of care. After dinner, the nights are for companionship. SpongeBob might settle down with a good book, Gary curled up nearby. Sometimes, SpongeBob plays his ukulele softly, singing gentle tunes to fill the quiet. Gary doesn't sing back, of course, but his soft meows seem to harmonize in their own way. Together, they share a peace that words cannot capture. And when it's finally time to sleep, SpongeBob tucks himself into bed, the pineapple house growing still. Gary, in his own little snail bed nearby, closes his eyes too. The two of them drift into slumber, knowing that no matter what the next day brings, the chaos of the Krusty Krab, the silliness of jellyfishing, or the antics of their neighbours, they will always return to one another. Gary's daily life may appear simple on the surface, but in truth, it is filled with meaning. Each meow, each nap, each shared meal with SpongeBob is part of a greater story of companionship. In Gary's routine, we see the joy of consistency, the beauty of loyalty, and the quiet happiness that comes from being loved. And for SpongeBob, there is no better reward than knowing his dearest friend is content, cared for, and always by his side. If you were to wander the streets of Bikini Bottom and hear a sound behind you, you might be surprised to find it wasn't a fish speaking, but a snail softly calling out, meow. To most residents of the sea, a snail's meow is simple, an ordinary noise, no different than the cluck of a clam or the croak of a sea worm. But to SpongeBob SquarePants, Gary's meow is far more than just a sound. It is a language, rich with meaning, emotion, and expression, a language that only a devoted sponge could truly understand. From the very beginning, SpongeBob and Gary seem to share this unspoken bond. Where others hear one meow, SpongeBob hears a whole sentence. When Gary's tone is bright and cheerful, SpongeBob knows it means hello or I'm happy to see you. When the meow is sharp and insistent, SpongeBob understands it as I'm hungry or don't forget my dinner. And when Gary lets out a low, soft sound, it is often his way of saying I'm tired, let's rest. This mutual understanding is what makes their relationship so unique. It is not built on words, but on love and attentiveness. Gary has always been more than he appears. In fact, in Sleepy Time, one of the earliest episodes to reveal his hidden depth, we see Gary in SpongeBob's dream as an articulate, well-spoken intellectual, reading books and offering wisdom. It is a striking contrast to his usual meows, but it proves what SpongeBob has always known, that behind those eyes and that shell lies a mind that is sharp, caring, and wise. In SpongeBob's subconscious, Gary is not limited to meows. He becomes a teacher, a guide, even a philosopher. It is as if SpongeBob's heart recognizes what his ears cannot always hear, that Gary's simple meows contain volumes of meaning. Take, for instance, the episode Treats, where Gary becomes obsessed with a new brand of snail snacks. His meows shift from playful requests to desperate demands, showing just how expressive he can be. SpongeBob, ever attentive, interprets each sound correctly, knowing when Gary is begging for more, when he's excited, and even when he's upset at being denied. To SpongeBob, Gary's meows are as clear as any conversation with Patrick or Sandy. This level of understanding doesn't come from magic. It comes from years of love, observation, and genuine connection. Gary also uses body language alongside his meows. The tilt of his eye stalks, the flick of his tail, or even the pace of his crawl add context to every sound he makes. A sharp meow paired with a glare might mean frustration, while a soft meow with slow movements might show sadness. SpongeBob reads these signals as easily as one might read words on a page. It's a skill developed not by training, but by living in harmony with someone you care for deeply. Other characters in Bikini Bottom, however, do not always share SpongeBob's gift. Patrick, for example, often misunderstands Gary. In Dumped, Patrick takes Gary in, believing their bond is growing, but in reality, Gary is only following Patrick's cookie crumbs. Patrick hears Gary's meows and assumes they mean love, when in fact they simply mean snack, please. This misunderstanding, though funny, highlights just how special SpongeBob's bond with Gary is. While Patrick sees only the surface, SpongeBob understands the heart. Even Squidward, who prides himself on sophistication, cannot decipher Gary's meows with the same accuracy. To Squidward, a meow is just a meow, background noise to SpongeBob's chaotic life. Yet, in moments when Squidward is forced to interact with Gary, he sometimes realizes that there is more to the snail than he assumed. Gary's meows, even to Squidward, can carry hints of judgment, sarcasm, or disapproval, tones that Squidward, ever sensitive to criticism, cannot completely ignore. But perhaps one of the most telling examples of Gary's communication comes from the episode Plankton's Pet. In this story, Plankton takes Gary under his wing, attempting to use him, in one of his schemes, to steal the Krabby Patty formula. At first, Plankton believes Gary is simple and easily manipulated. Yet it quickly becomes clear that Gary's meows and actions are clever, calculated, and full of hidden meaning. He outsmarts Plankton entirely, proving that his meows are not mere noises but expressions of a sharp mind at work. What makes Gary's language so beautiful is not its complexity, but its simplicity. It reminds us that communication doesn't always need words. A look, a sound, a gesture, these are often enough when two beings truly care for one another. SpongeBob never questions what Gary means. He listens with his heart as much as his ears. That is why their bond feels so strong, even compared to SpongeBob's relationships with his other friends. At night, when the pineapple house grows quiet and SpongeBob settles into bed, Gary often gives a final soft meow before curling into his snail bed. To SpongeBob, that meow is more than just a noise. It is a good night, a wish for sweet dreams, and a promise that he'll be there in the morning. These little exchanges, so ordinary yet so full of meaning, make their life together warm and complete. Gary's meow is the language of love, patience, and loyalty. It may not be understood by everyone in Bikini Bottom, but to SpongeBob it speaks louder than any words. And in that simple sound, repeated day after day, lies a friendship that will last a lifetime. To the untrained eye, Gary might seem like nothing more than a simple sea snail, quiet, slow, and content with little more than a bowl of food and a cozy nap. But those who know him well, and especially SpongeBob, understand that beneath his humble shell lies a depth of intelligence and wisdom far beyond what anyone expects. Gary is not merely a pet, he is a thinker, an observer, and sometimes even a teacher. One of the clearest glimpses into Gary's hidden mind comes from the episode Sleepy Time. When SpongeBob drifts off into the dreams of Bikini Bottom's residents, he enters Gary's dream as well. What he finds there astonishes him. Gary is not a meowing snail at all, but a refined intellectual, walking upright in a scholarly robe, surrounded by books, and speaking in a deep, eloquent voice. In this dreamscape, Gary is revealed as a philosopher and mentor, guiding SpongeBob with wisdom that feels both surprising and natural. It's a moment that confirmed what SpongeBob had always sensed, that Gary's quiet meows carry within them the weight of knowledge and insight. Even outside of dreams, Gary's wisdom shows itself in subtle ways. He is remarkably observant, often noticing things that others overlook. In Plankton's Pet, for example, Gary manages to outwit Plankton, who believes he can manipulate the snail for his schemes. Plankton, underestimating Gary, quickly finds himself defeated by the snail's cunning. Gary's calm demeanour hides a sharp wit and problem-solving mind. Where others might panic or fall for Plankton's tricks, Gary sees through the deception with ease. SpongeBob often relies on Gary for guidance, even if he doesn't always say so directly. In moments of confusion or sadness, SpongeBob will talk to Gary, sharing his troubles openly. And though Gary only responds with a simple meow, SpongeBob interprets it as the wisest of advice. In Have You Seen This Snail? We see just how deep this bond goes. SpongeBob is devastated when Gary runs away, and the emptiness he feels without him reveals how much he values Gary's quiet companionship. When they are finally reunited, SpongeBob hugs Gary with tears in his eyes, whispering, "Don't you ever leave me again." For SpongeBob, Gary is more than comfort. He is a source of grounding wisdom, a reminder of what matters most. Gary's intelligence also comes through in his independence. Unlike many other pets in Bikini Bottom, Gary is capable of navigating the world on his own. In episodes like Gary in Love, he embarks on his own adventures, proving that he is not just reliant on SpongeBob. He makes choices, follows his heart, and expresses desires that reflect a personality all his own. It is this independence that sets him apart. He is not a passive companion, but an active presence in the life of Bikini Bottom. Even SpongeBob's friends have occasionally glimpsed Gary's wisdom. Patrick, though often oblivious, has moments where he looks at Gary with respect, especially when Gary shows patience that Patrick himself lacks. Squidward, too, though he would never admit it, has seen Gary's intelligence firsthand. In I Was a Teenage Gary, when Squidward neglects to feed him, the situation spirals into chaos, and Squidward learns a valuable lesson about responsibility. Gary's resilience through it all reflects his quiet strength, a lesson that, even if Squidward won't say it out loud, surely left an impression. What makes Gary's wisdom so unique is that it never demands attention. He does not boast, lecture, or seek recognition. Instead, his guidance comes in subtle forms, through observation, timing, and presence. When SpongeBob makes mistakes, Gary does not scold him. He simply meows in a tone that says more than words could. When SpongeBob succeeds, Gary is there with a proud, approving sound. In this way, Gary acts almost like a mentor who teaches not through instructions, but through gentle reminders of what SpongeBob already knows. In a way, Gary represents the voice of calm in SpongeBob's often chaotic life. Bikini Bottom is full of noise, Patrick's laughter, Squidward's complaints, Mr. Krabs' obsession with money, and the non-stop bustle of the Krusty Krab. But at home, Gary provides balance. His slow pace, quiet demeanour, and thoughtful presence remind SpongeBob to slow down, to appreciate the small things, and to remember what truly matters. For SpongeBob, who is always eager and excitable, Gary is the anchor that keeps him grounded. Gary's wisdom also extends into the symbolic. He is often portrayed as a guardian figure, protecting SpongeBob in ways subtle yet meaningful. In I Was a Teenage Gary, when SpongeBob is accidentally injected with snail plasma, Gary is there, showing resilience and bravery despite his own challenges. And in moments when SpongeBob is overwhelmed or distraught, Gary's steady presence becomes a silent reassurance. No matter what happens outside, at home, everything will be okay. To SpongeBob, Gary's wisdom is not about grand gestures or profound speeches. It is about love, patience, and understanding. Sometimes, the wisest companions are those who say the least. Gary's meows, his patience, and his ability to simply be there make him the most dependable presence in SpongeBob's world. And though others may not see it, SpongeBob knows that his snail holds an intelligence and kindness that makes life brighter every day. At the end of the day, Gary doesn't need to wear a robe or carry books, as he did in SpongeBob's dream, to show his wisdom. His actions, his loyalty, and his quiet guidance prove that sometimes the deepest truths are spoken not with words, but with love. For SpongeBob, Gary will always be more than a pet. He is a teacher, a protector, and a lifelong friend whose wisdom makes the Pineapple House a home. Most days, Gary's life is peaceful. A bowl of snail food in the morning, naps in the Pineapple House, and soft meows to remind SpongeBob of his presence. But every now and then, the quiet snail steps out from the background and becomes the star of his own story. These adventures, though sometimes small in scale, reveal just how much personality, bravery, and spirit Gary truly has. One of the most beloved examples is the episode Gary Takes a Bath. In it, SpongeBob is determined to give Gary a good cleaning. What seems like a simple task quickly becomes an adventure of wit, patience, and stubbornness. SpongeBob tries everything, singing songs, offering bribes, even disguising himself as a bar of soap, but Gary refuses to enter the bathtub. His clever evasions show just how smart and independent he is. What makes the episode so charming is not SpongeBob's frantic antics, but Gary's ability to outsmart him at every turn. In the end, Gary proves that he has a will of his own, and even SpongeBob's enthusiasm can't override it. It's a reminder that pets, too, have personalities and preferences, and Gary's adventurous resistance becomes a tale of quiet triumph. But Gary's adventures aren't always confined to the Pineapple House. In Gary in Love, we see a different side of him entirely, a romantic, determined snail with a heart full of courage. When Gary encounters Mary, another snail, he is instantly smitten. What follows is a journey across town as Gary does everything in his power to win her affection. From chasing after her to enduring challenges, Gary's determination shines through. Though SpongeBob isn't the center of this story, his love for Gary is still evident. He cheers for him, worries for him, and supports him as he embarks on this snail-sized romance. It's an adventure that proves Gary is not just SpongeBob's companion. He is a creature with dreams, feelings, and the courage to chase after them. Gary has also faced moments of real danger and challenge. In Shell Shocked, SpongeBob accidentally cracks Gary's shell and panics at the thought of hurting his beloved friend. What follows is a journey of healing as SpongeBob tries to mend the shell and make things right. Gary, despite his injury, shows patience and resilience throughout the ordeal. The episode highlights not only SpongeBob's deep care, but also Gary's strength in overcoming difficulties. His quiet bravery turns what could have been a tragedy into a story of love and recovery. Another notable adventure comes in I Was a Teenage Gary. When Squidward neglects to feed him, Gary ends up in a frightening situation that nearly costs him his health. But even here, Gary's strength is undeniable. Though he suffers because of Squidward's carelessness, his survival and eventual recovery remind everyone, including Squidward himself, of just how important and resilient he is. The adventure may not have been one Gary asked for, but it showed his endurance and the depth of SpongeBob's devotion to him. Not all of Gary's adventures are grand or dramatic. Sometimes they're simple yet profound. In Your Shoes Untied, Gary helps teach SpongeBob how to tie his shoelaces, revealing again his hidden cleverness. While the world may see him as just a snail, SpongeBob knows Gary has knowledge that even he relies on. In these small moments, Gary steps beyond the role of pet and becomes a guide, showing that his adventures can be as subtle as teaching SpongeBob a life skill. Gary's adventures also reveal his playful side. In episodes like The Great Snail Race, Gary becomes a competitor, taking part in the town's sporting event. At first, SpongeBob is overzealous, pushing Gary too hard to win, but in the end, the lesson shines through. Gary's worth isn't tied to his speed or success, but to who he is. His participation alone is enough to prove that he belongs in the spotlight. Even when he doesn't cross the finish line first, Gary wins the audience's hearts with his determination and gentle spirit. And who could forget the times when Gary wanders off into his own misadventures in Have You Seen This Snail? Also known as The Lost Episode, Gary leaves home after feeling neglected, leading to one of the most emotional adventures in the entire series. Though this story centers heavily on SpongeBob's desperate search, it is also Gary's adventure. A journey through the streets of Bikini Bottom, encounters with strangers, and the realization that his true home will always be with SpongeBob. His return is not just a reunion, it is the triumphant ending of an adventure that reaffirmed the strength of their bond. Through all of these moments, Gary's adventures reveal something essential. He is not a passive pet, but an active character with agency, desires, and a spirit all his own. Whether he's dodging bath time, falling in love, recovering from hardship, or competing in a race, Gary shows time and again that he is capable of more than anyone expects. His adventures may not be as loud as SpongeBob's jellyfishing trips or as grand as Sandy's scientific experiments, but they are filled with heart, humor, and quiet lessons. At the end of every adventure, no matter how big or small, Gary always finds his way back home. And that, perhaps, is the most important part of his stories. His journeys remind us that home is not just a place, but the people, or sponges, you share it with. For Gary, every adventure leads back to SpongeBob. And for SpongeBob, every adventure is brighter, knowing Gary is by his side. In the bustling undersea city of Bikini Bottom, where jellyfish buzz and fry cooks flip patties, life can often feel chaotic. Yet, inside SpongeBob's pineapple home, there exists a softer rhythm, one marked by small, tender gestures of love. At the center of this gentle world lies the bond between SpongeBob and Gary, a bond built not on grand adventures or dramatic events, but on the simple, everyday acts of care that make their relationship feel so special. Every morning, the day begins the same way, with SpongeBob thinking of Gary first. No matter how excited SpongeBob might be to dash off to the Krusty Krab, or how distracted he may become with jellyfishing plans, Gary's needs always come before his own. SpongeBob pours out snail food with care, humming happily as he sets the bowl down, as if he were preparing a feast for royalty, in treats. This devotion is exaggerated to comedic extremes, with SpongeBob showering Gary with snail snacks in an effort to keep him happy. The episode shows what SpongeBob has always known in his heart. Gary's happiness is a top priority, even if it means SpongeBob spoiling him just a little too much. Bath time, though often a battle of wills, is another ritual that reflects their bond. In Gary Takes a Bath, SpongeBob's determination to keep Gary clean goes far beyond simple hygiene. It is a sign of care. He wants Gary to be healthy, comfortable, and safe, even if Gary himself doesn't see the point of soaking in a tub. The hilarity of the episode, the disguises, the bribes, the failed attempts, actually hides a deeper truth. SpongeBob is willing to do anything, even make a fool of himself, just to take care of Gary. For SpongeBob, love means patience, even when it comes in the form of a stubborn snail refusing to touch water. Their bond also shines through in the little comforts SpongeBob gives Gary every day. Gary has his own snail bed tucked neatly inside SpongeBob's room, a place of warmth and rest that SpongeBob made just for him. In Sleepy Time, we glimpse Gary's dreams, where he lives as a wise and scholarly figure, but in reality, his snail bed is enough to show SpongeBob's devotion. SpongeBob never treats Gary as an afterthought. His needs are woven into the very fabric of the pineapple home. But perhaps the most touching expression of care comes not in the routines, but in the moments of worry. In Have You Seen This Snail? SpongeBob is devastated when Gary goes missing. His desperate search across Bikini Bottom, his posters plastered on every wall, and his tearful pleas for Gary to come home, all of it reveals just how much SpongeBob's heart depends on his snail. The reunion at the end, when Gary crawls back into SpongeBob's arms, is one of the most emotional moments in the entire series. It proves that their relationship is more than pet and owner. It is family, bound together by love that endures even the hardest trials. Even in smaller, everyday moments, SpongeBob's attentiveness never falters. When SpongeBob is cooking, he sometimes saves little treats for Gary, sharing his joy in the kitchen. When he practices jellyfishing skills, Gary is often there, watching with calm patience. And when SpongeBob talks about his day, whether it's a triumph or a silly mistake, Gary is the first to hear the story. It doesn't matter that Gary responds with only a meow. SpongeBob knows that he is listening, and that, in its own way, is care returned. Gary, too, shows care in his own quiet ways. He may not cook or clean, but he gives SpongeBob companionship and comfort. In Plankton's Pet, his ability to outsmart Plankton and return home safely is his way of protecting the balance of their life together. In I Was a Teenage Gary, his patience with SpongeBob, who briefly turns into a snail himself, shows that Gary's love is not shaken even in the strangest of circumstances. Gary's loyalty, his willingness to stay by SpongeBob's side through every odd situation, is his way of returning the devotion he receives daily. The bond of care is also about forgiveness. In episodes where SpongeBob falters, whether by neglecting Gary for a short time or spoiling him too much, Gary always finds it in his heart to forgive. Their love is not fragile but resilient, strengthened by the knowledge that mistakes are always followed by kindness. This cycle of love, patience, and forgiveness is what makes their relationship so genuine. It is easy to overlook the significance of small gestures in life, but for SpongeBob and Gary, it is those gestures that matter most. A bowl of food, a bath, a bedtime story, or even a simple hug, these are the moments that define their bond. They remind us that care doesn't always have to be dramatic or heroic. Sometimes it is in the ordinary, everyday acts of love that we find the deepest connections. At night, as SpongeBob tucks himself into bed and Gary curls into his snail bed nearby, the house falls into a peaceful silence. Outside, the ocean may be filled with noise and adventure, but inside there is only warmth. SpongeBob looks over at Gary, smiling as he whispers goodnight, and Gary answers with a soft meow. It is a simple exchange, yet it carries all the love in the world. Theirs is a bond built on care, steady, unwavering, and full of joy. SpongeBob may be known across Bikini Bottom for his laughter, his optimism, and his endless energy, but at the end of the day, it is his care for Gary that shows the truest measure of his heart. And for Gary, who asks for nothing more than love and companionship, that care is everything. Together, they remind us that happiness isn't always found in adventures or accomplishments. Sometimes it's found in the simple, tender act of caring for someone you love. Every friendship has its trials, and even the deepest bonds are sometimes tested by distance, misunderstandings, or mistakes. For SpongeBob and Gary, that test came in one of the most unforgettable moments in their lives, a time when Gary, the faithful snail who had always been by SpongeBob's side, disappeared. This story, told in the episode Have You Seen This Snail?, is perhaps the most powerful reminder of the love they share, because it proves beyond a doubt that their bond is unbreakable, no matter how far apart they may be. It all began with something so ordinary, so simple, a toy. SpongeBob received a new paddleball set and, in his excitement, became consumed with the challenge of setting a record for the most hits. His determination, as always, was full of energy and optimism, but in his distraction, he made a mistake. Caught up in his game, he forgot to feed Gary. At first, Gary tried to get his attention with his usual meows, nudges, and hopeful eyes. But as time went on, SpongeBob remained oblivious, lost in the rhythm of his paddleball. For Gary, it was a heartbreaking moment. His needs had never been ignored before. SpongeBob's care was always consistent, always loving, but now, for the first time, he felt forgotten. Hungry, sad, and unsure of what else to do, Gary made a choice that would change everything. He left the pineapple house. Crawling out into the streets of Bikini Bottom, he began a lonely journey away from home, searching for food and perhaps, unknowingly, testing the strength of the love he had always known. When SpongeBob finally noticed Gary was gone, his heart broke instantly. The paddleball was tossed aside, meaningless compared to the absence of his best friend. The pineapple house, once filled with warmth and joy, felt empty. SpongeBob wasted no time in searching for Gary. He plastered posters all over Bikini Bottom. Have you seen this snail? His desperate plea echoing through every corner of the city. The sight of SpongeBob running through town, calling out Gary's name with tears in his eyes, revealed the depth of his regret. For SpongeBob, losing Gary was not just losing a pet. It was like losing a piece of himself, a part of his heart that made his home complete. Meanwhile, Gary's journey took him into unfamiliar places. Lost and hungry, he wandered until he encountered an elderly woman named Granny. At first, it seemed like a blessing. Granny welcomed Gary into her home, feeding him and showering him with affection. To an outsider, it looked as though Gary had found comfort. But beneath Granny's kindness was a darker truth. She had an unhealthy habit of overfeeding and smothering snails. Gary quickly became overwhelmed by the excessive attention, realizing that though he was being cared for, it wasn't the kind of love he truly needed. Granny's care was not born of understanding, but of obsession. Gary knew in his heart that this was not his home. Back in Bikini Bottom, SpongeBob's search grew more desperate by the hour. His friends tried to comfort him, but nothing could ease the emptiness he felt. He replayed his mistake over and over in his mind, blaming himself for letting Gary down. It was in this pain that SpongeBob and the audience realized something profound. Gary wasn't just part of his life, he was his life. Every routine, every laugh, every quiet moment at home revolved around their bond. Without Gary, SpongeBob felt incomplete. The climax of their story came when Gary, having grown weary of Granny's excessive treatment, escaped her house. Crawling through the streets, his little body tired but determined, he followed his heart back toward SpongeBob. The moment they were reunited is one of the most emotional in SpongeBob's history. SpongeBob, overjoyed and tearful, scooped Gary into his arms, holding him close as he cried, "Don't you ever leave me again." His voice cracked with sincerity, filled with both regret and relief. Gary answered with a soft, forgiving meow, a simple sound that carried all the weight of forgiveness and love. What makes this story so powerful is its honesty. SpongeBob made a mistake, a very human mistake, despite being a sponge. He got distracted, and he forgot someone who depended on him. But instead of glossing over it, the story showed the consequences. Gary felt unloved and left. And yet, the beauty lies in the reunion, in the way Gary returned and SpongeBob's love grew even stronger. Their bond wasn't weakened by the experience, it was strengthened, because it reminded them both of what they meant to each other. Have you seen this snail? Remains one of the most iconic SpongeBob stories, not just because of its emotional weight, but because it captures the truth of love. Love is not about being perfect. It's about care, forgiveness, and devotion that endures even when mistakes are made. Gary's return proved that his home wasn't with someone who fed him endlessly or gave him toys. It was with SpongeBob, who loved him unconditionally. The episode also highlights the importance of small gestures. Gary didn't need grand displays of affection. He just needed SpongeBob's presence, his attention, his love. And SpongeBob realized that even the simplest act, like filling a food bowl or offering a hug, carries immense meaning. From that moment on, SpongeBob never forgot how important it was to show Gary he cared each and every day. As the curtain falls on this story, the Pineapple House is once again filled with warmth. SpongeBob plays with Gary, feeds him with care, and showers him with affection. And Gary, in his calm, gentle way, meows back, reminding SpongeBob that he is forgiven and that their bond is stronger than ever. It is a story of loss, regret, reunion, and love. A story that proves Gary isn't just SpongeBob's pet, but his family. And no matter what trials may come, their bond will always endure, because it is built on love too deep to be broken. Though Gary spends most of his time inside the Pineapple House, his presence reaches far beyond its walls. SpongeBob may be his closest companion, but Gary's life is touched by many others in Bikini Bottom. Each character, Patrick, Squidward, even Plankton, reveals a different side of Gary's personality. Through these connections, we see that Gary is not just a background figure, but a meaningful part of the entire community. One of Gary's most important relationships, after SpongeBob, is with Patrick Star. Patrick is SpongeBob's best friend, and by extension, he is often around Gary. Their relationship has always been both funny and heartfelt. In Dumped, this dynamic takes center stage. Gary appears to abandon SpongeBob and begins following Patrick instead. SpongeBob, heartbroken, believes Gary has chosen Patrick over him. But the truth, as revealed later, is far simpler. Patrick had cookies in his pocket, and Gary, like any hungry snail, couldn't resist. Though the situation caused SpongeBob pain, it also demonstrated something important. Gary's bond with SpongeBob is not easily replaced. Patrick may provide a snack, but Gary's heart always pulls him home. Yet, Patrick and Gary share moments that are genuinely endearing. Patrick, with his childlike curiosity, often treats Gary like a friend rather than a pet. Sometimes he speaks to him as if they are equals, even though he doesn't always understand Gary's meows. Gary's patience with Patrick shows his gentle nature. He tolerates Patrick's clumsiness and occasional silliness, perhaps recognizing that underneath it all, Patrick cares about him too. Their connection may not be as strong as the one he shares with SpongeBob, but it is still a wholesome reminder that Gary has a way of softening even the most clueless starfish. Then there is Squidward. Unlike SpongeBob and Patrick, Squidward does not go out of his way to interact with Gary. In fact, his usual response is mild annoyance, especially when Gary's slime trails end up on his lawn or near his clarinet. But despite Squidward's grumbling, there is an unspoken respect between them. Gary rarely bothers Squidward directly, and Squidward rarely directs his frustration at Gary personally. In I Was a Teenage Gary, Squidward is tasked with taking care of Gary while SpongeBob and Patrick are away. Unfortunately, Squidward's neglect nearly harms Gary, reminding him and the audience of how essential SpongeBob's love truly is. Yet, even in this failure, Squidward's indirect interaction with Gary reveals something important. While Squidward may not appreciate SpongeBob's energy, he cannot ignore the quiet importance of Gary in SpongeBob's life. Gary's connection with Plankton, though rare, is perhaps the most surprising. In Plankton's Pet, Plankton adopts Gary, hoping to use him as part of a scheme to steal the Krabby Patty formula. At first, Plankton believes Gary is just a simple snail, easily manipulated. But as the story unfolds, Gary completely outsmarts him, showing cleverness and resilience that even Plankton didn't expect. Gary's calm demeanor hides a sharp mind, and his ability to foil Plankton's plan proves that he is far from ordinary. What makes this episode so delightful is the reversal of roles. The tiny villain, usually the clever trickster, is undone by the supposed pet. Gary's interactions with Plankton highlight his intelligence and remind us that even the quietest characters have the power to change the story. Beyond these close interactions, Gary also touches the lives of others in Bikini Bottom in smaller ways. In the Great Snail Race, Gary competes in a snail race, watched by the entire town. Though SpongeBob's overzealous coaching causes more harm than good, the fact that Gary participates at all shows how he is recognized by the community as more than just SpongeBob's pet. The citizens of Bikini Bottom cheer for him, showing that they too value him as part of their world. Gary also crosses paths with Sandy Cheeks from time to time. While their interactions are not frequent, Sandy's respect for intelligence likely extends to Gary, especially after moments like Sleepy Time, where Gary's dream self demonstrates remarkable wisdom. Sandy, a scientist who values cleverness, surely sees Gary as more than just a snail. Though not always shown directly in episodes, it isn't hard to imagine Sandy admiring Gary's sharp mind in the same way SpongeBob does. Even Mr. Krabs has encountered Gary on occasion. In Your Shoes Untied, Gary shows SpongeBob how to tie his shoes, revealing skills that even Mr. Krabs' seasoned sailors might envy. While Mr. Krabs' main focus is always on money, it's hard to deny that even he would respect a snail with practical knowledge that SpongeBob himself struggled to master. Through all these interactions, Gary remains consistent, gentle, wise, and quietly observant. He does not seek attention or demand recognition, yet he leaves an impression on everyone he meets. Patrick sees him as a quiet companion, Squidward as a tolerable neighbour, Plankton as an unexpected rival, and the town as a competitor worthy of cheers. Each perspective adds another layer to Gary's character, proving that he is not defined solely by his role as SpongeBob's pet. Yet, no matter how far these interactions reach, everything circles back to SpongeBob. Patrick may offer snacks, Squidward may sigh in exasperation, Plankton may be outwitted, and the town may cheer, but at the end of the day, Gary always returns home to SpongeBob. His adventures with others are important, but his true loyalty never wavers. In this way, Gary is a bridge between SpongeBob and the rest of Bikini Bottom. Through him, SpongeBob connects more deeply to his friends, his neighbors, and even his rivals. Gary's presence in the community of Bikini Bottom is proof of his importance, not only to SpongeBob, but to the entire world they live in. He may not speak in full sentences, except in dreams, but his meows, his actions, and his intelligence have left an impression on everyone he meets. Quietly, gently, and without ever seeking the spotlight, Gary has become an integral part of life under the sea. At first glance, Gary might not strike anyone as a defender. With his slow crawl, gentle meows, and calm presence, he seems far more suited to quiet afternoons napping in his snail bed than to heroic acts. But those who know Gary best understand that beneath his humble shell lies a spirit of loyalty and courage. Time and time again, Gary has proven that when SpongeBob needs him most, he can be far more than a companion, he can be a protector. One of the earliest and most memorable examples comes from I Was a Teenage Gary. In this episode, Gary's well-being is put at risk when Squidward neglects to feed him while SpongeBob and Patrick are away. As Gary grows weak, the situation escalates until SpongeBob accidentally receives a dose of snail plasma and begins to transform into a snail himself. Though much of the episode is filled with comedy, the underlying message is clear. Gary's endurance and survival through neglect highlight his resilience. And when SpongeBob finally returns, Gary is quick to show forgiveness, his meows carrying reassurance that their bond is unshaken. It is in his ability to endure hardship without bitterness that Gary demonstrates his quiet strength. But Gary's protective side is not just about surviving, it's about stepping up when SpongeBob is vulnerable. In The Great Snail Race, SpongeBob's enthusiasm for competition causes him to push Gary too hard, nearly exhausting him to the point of collapse. Yet, even in his weakened state, Gary resists SpongeBob's overbearing training. His refusal to continue is not an act of rebellion, but of protection. For himself, yes, but also for SpongeBob. By stopping, Gary forces SpongeBob to see the error of his ways, protecting their bond from being damaged by unrealistic expectations. Sometimes, protection is not about fighting off threats, but about setting boundaries that preserve love and respect. In Have You Seen This Snail?, Gary once again reveals his protective instincts. Though the focus of the story is on his disappearance and reunion with SpongeBob, his decision to leave Granny's house shows a kind of bravery not often associated with snails. Overfed and smothered by Granny's obsessive care, Gary could have stayed in comfort, but he knew it wasn't right. Instead, he risked the unknown, crawling away into the streets to find his way back to SpongeBob. This act of courage protected not only his own well-being, but also the bond he shared with SpongeBob. It would have been easy to accept endless food and pampering, but Gary knew that true love is not about excess, it's about understanding. His choice to leave ensured that his relationship with SpongeBob could be restored. Gary's role as protector is also highlighted in Plankton's pet. When Plankton attempts to use Gary in a scheme to steal the Krabby Patty formula, Gary's cleverness quickly turns the tables. Rather than falling victim to Plankton's manipulation, Gary outsmarts him at every step. What begins as Plankton's plan ends as Gary's quiet triumph. In protecting the formula, Gary not only defends SpongeBob's workplace, but also shields his friend from yet another of Plankton's schemes. It's a reminder that Gary's intelligence is his greatest weapon, and that protection sometimes comes in the form of wit rather than brute strength. Perhaps the most surprising display of Gary's protective side comes in The Thing. In this episode, SpongeBob and Patrick believe they have found a monster, but it is actually Squidward covered in cement. Gary, however, is unafraid. While others panic or flee, Gary calmly approaches the monster, showing both bravery and curiosity. Though subtle, this moment reflects Gary's ability to face situations with a level-headedness that others lack. His protective instinct often lies in his composure, reminding SpongeBob that not every challenge must be met with fear or frenzy. Gary also shows his protective nature in small, everyday ways. In sleepy time, SpongeBob dreams of Gary as a wise, articulate scholar. Though it is only a dream, the imagery reflects how SpongeBob views his snail, as a guide and guardian of knowledge. Dream Gary gives SpongeBob advice, steering him with patience and wisdom. To SpongeBob, this is no accident of imagination, it is the truth of how he sees Gary every day. Even when Gary is silent, his presence protects SpongeBob's spirit, grounding him in calmness amid the chaos of Bikini Bottom. In Shell Shocked, Gary demonstrates resilience after his shell is accidentally cracked. SpongeBob, filled with guilt and fear, scrambles to make it right. Gary, though injured, shows patience and trust in SpongeBob's care. His strength in recovery is a form of protection too, for it reassures SpongeBob that their bond can withstand hardship. Gary's endurance shields SpongeBob from despair, reminding him that mistakes can be healed with love and care. What makes Gary's protective nature so remarkable is its quietness. He is not loud or flashy, and he does not seek recognition. His acts of protection are subtle but powerful, woven into the fabric of his loyalty. Sometimes it's in the way he resists unhealthy treatment. Sometimes it's in the way he forgives mistakes. And sometimes it's in the way he simply stands by SpongeBob, offering comfort that protects him from loneliness. In many ways, Gary is the unsung hero of SpongeBob's life. He doesn't need a sword, a shield, or a dramatic moment of battle to prove his courage. His protection comes in the form of presence, wisdom, and loyalty. For SpongeBob, knowing that Gary is always there is enough to make him feel safe, loved, and whole. And so, though the world may see Gary as just a snail, SpongeBob knows the truth. Gary is his protector. Not through strength or speed, but through love, the quiet, steady love that shields SpongeBob from the hardest parts of life. In the vast ocean of Bikini Bottom, there are countless sights to see and adventures to live. Jellyfish fields stretch endlessly. The Krusty Krab bustles with hungry customers, and SpongeBob's laughter can often be heard echoing down Conch Street. But no matter how busy the days become, or how wild the adventures turn, there is always one place SpongeBob's heart calls him back to, his home. And at the centre of that home, waiting faithfully, is Gary the Snail. For SpongeBob, Gary is not just part of his household, he is the household. The Pineapple House might be filled with furniture, decorations, and all of SpongeBob's quirky belongings. But without Gary, it would feel empty. His meows are the soft background music of SpongeBob's life, the gentle reminders that someone is always there. When SpongeBob comes home after a long day of flipping Krabby Patties, it is Gary who greets him at the door. When SpongeBob sings silly songs on his ukulele, it is Gary who listens patiently. And when SpongeBob lies down at night, it is Gary's presence nearby that fills the pineapple with warmth. This sense of home has been tested before, most notably in Have You Seen This Snail?, when Gary's absence turned SpongeBob's world upside down. That experience revealed what SpongeBob had always known in his heart. Without Gary, life is incomplete. Since then, SpongeBob has never taken Gary's presence for granted. Each meow, each shared meal, each quiet evening together feels like a treasure. What makes Gary so special is the unconditional love he gives. He does not judge SpongeBob for his mistakes, his silliness, or his over-the-top enthusiasm. Where others in Bikini Bottom sometimes roll their eyes or grow tired of SpongeBob's boundless energy, Gary accepts him fully. To Gary, SpongeBob is not too loud, too excitable, or too strange. He is simply SpongeBob, the friend he has always loved. That acceptance gives SpongeBob the freedom to be his truest self, knowing that at home he will always be understood. The love flows both ways, of course. SpongeBob's devotion to Gary is unmatched. He cooks for him, cares for him, and worries about him with a tenderness that shows just how deep their bond runs. In episodes like Shell Shocked, when Gary is injured, SpongeBob's frantic attempts to help prove that his heart aches at even the thought of Gary suffering. In The Great Snail Race, his mistake of pushing Gary too hard only strengthens his resolve to never put pressure above love again. Every experience, good or bad, becomes a lesson in how to love Gary better. What is most beautiful about their relationship is that it thrives in the ordinary. SpongeBob and Gary do not need constant adventures to feel fulfilled. Their happiest moments often happen in the quiet spaces, sharing breakfast in the kitchen, sitting side by side in the living room, or exchanging a meow and a smile before bedtime. These simple routines, repeated day after day, are the heartbeat of their bond. They show that true happiness is not always found in excitement or grandeur, but in the constancy of love. Gary's role as the heart of home also extends to how he connects SpongeBob with others. Patrick, Squidward, Sandy, and even Mr. Krabs have all had moments where Gary's presence added meaning to the story. Whether he was unintentionally causing SpongeBob and Patrick to learn about loyalty in Dumped, teaching SpongeBob how to tie his shoes in Your Shoes Untied, or outsmarting Plankton in Plankton's Pet, Gary has a quiet way of bringing out lessons not only for SpongeBob, but for everyone around him. He is a small figure in Bikini Bottom, yet his impact is immeasurable. And then there is SpongeBob's view of him. To SpongeBob, Gary is more than a pet, more than even a best friend. He is family. In moments of loneliness, Gary is there. In moments of joy, Gary shares in it. In moments of sadness, Gary offers silent comfort. He is the constant in SpongeBob's life, the one presence that never wavers, no matter what chaos surrounds them. Gary's unconditional love is the anchor that grounds SpongeBob in a world of constant ups and downs. Perhaps this is why SpongeBob often refers to Gary with affectionate nicknames, Gare Bear, Gare, or simply My Gary. These names are not just playful, they are proof of the tenderness in SpongeBob's heart. Each one is a reminder that Gary is not an accessory to his life, but the very core of it. In a way, Gary represents the simplest truth about love, that it is found not in words, but in actions. His meows may be few, his pace may be slow, but his loyalty, patience, and presence speak volumes. Through him, we are reminded that family can come in many forms, and that sometimes the purest love is the quietest. As the sun sets over Bikini Bottom and SpongeBob tucks himself into bed, he looks over at Gary in his snail bed, smiling as he whispers goodnight. Gary answers with a soft, gentle meow. It is an exchange that has happened countless times before and will happen countless times again, but for SpongeBob, it never loses its magic. It is the sound of home, of love, of everything that matters most. And so, our story comes to a close, not with a grand adventure or a dramatic twist, but with the simple truth that has always defined SpongeBob and Gary. Love is found in the everyday moments we share with those closest to us. SpongeBob may be the face of laughter and joy in Bikini Bottom, but it is Gary, the quiet, loyal snail, who makes that joy possible, because he is the heart of home.